Hey there, Brew Crew, and welcome back to another Brew Crew review. This week, we're going to be taking a look at The Spill. The Spill is a cooperative game for 1 to 4 players. The offshore oil rig Deepwell 4 has begun leaking oil into the ocean, and it's up to the players to contain the spill and rescue the wildlife. Let's head down to the table for a quick rules overview, and then we'll come back up and I'll let you know what I think. A game of the spill is won by completing all of the conditions on one of the win condition cards. These are drawn during setup, and each one will have 3 different objectives that you need to complete. They are arranged in difficulty based on the number of dots in the top corner. There is one win condition card with only one objective on it, and that is the uncappable well. And the only way to win this one is to completely empty the bag of dice. Players will lose the game if there are one of each type of animal in sickbay, if there are 3 of a single type of animal in sickbay, or if there are 6 or more of these spill out tokens on the board. So as you can see, the board is a large circular grid in the center that is divided into 4 quadrants, and each quadrant has 6 sectors. Throughout the game, you're going to be dropping more and more oil dice into the tower and placing them in the quadrant and sector based on which quadrant they land in and which number is rolled. So, for example, if I rolled a 6 like I have here, it would go in this quadrant and into this sector based on the die value of 6. Dice are always placed from the inside to the outside of the circle, so the first die in a sector will be placed here, second will be placed here, and third here. If a die ends up in a space with an animal token, that token is flipped to the contaminated side. If a die were to be placed in a space that already has a contaminated animal, that animal is immediately removed to sickbay. Remember that too many animals in sickbay is one of the losing conditions. And whether the animal is contaminated or moved to sickbay, the die will stay in that location. If a sector already has 3 dice in it and you need to place a 4th, then there is a spill out. This causes a few things to happen. First, you'll move this token up on the spill out track. This will increase the number of dice you drop during the spill phase of each round. Then you'll place one of these spill out tokens on the sector where the spill out occurred. Then the oil overflows to the next available space clockwise. If this sector already has 3 dice in it, then it causes another spill out, and on until you get to an available space. Remember to flip over any animal tokens to their contaminated side if that happens during an overflow as well. 6 of these spill out tokens on the board at the end of a player's turn is one of the losing conditions, so you want to make sure to get these cleaned up. When drawing dice out of the bag, it's possible that you may draw one of the 4 blue weather dice. This die is dropped along with the rest, and you don't need to redraw a black die to replace it. And then depending on what is rolled on the weather die, there will be effects in place, and the game comes with these tokens to help you keep track. If the weather die shows this symbol, then it costs 1 additional action point in order to rescue an animal. This symbol means that a ship's movement is reduced by 1. This symbol here means that you may not use your specialist's ability this round. This die face will allow players to take one additional action point for the round, and it's the only beneficial one on the dice. And finally, this symbol here means that you may not use the resource cards for this round. You can still place activation cubes on the resource cards, but you cannot spend them to use the actions. And we'll talk a little bit more about resource cards and how they're activated in just a little bit.
Once they have completed the spill phase, players will have 4 action points to spend.
1 point can be spent to move your ship 1 or 2 sectors. Ships can move either clockwise or counterclockwise. And multiple ships can share the same space. You will need to be in the same sector as an animal or oil die in order to affect them. It costs 1 point to push back an oil die, meaning that you take it from the sector where your ship is and place it back into the draw bag. For 3 of your 4 action points, you can remove an oil die from the game altogether. When that happens, rather than placing it back in the bag, you'll instead place it on one of these spaces on this board. For either of these actions that remove dice from the board, remember to remove the spillout token if there are no longer 3 dice in that sector. 1 action point will allow you to rescue a healthy marine animal from your sector, or 2 points will allow you to rescue a contaminated animal. Rescued animals are placed in one of these spaces on this board. Notice that both the rescued animal area and the removed oil area each show these orange cubes. For each set of 6 different types of animals rescued, or every set of 3 oil dice removed, players will earn these activation cubes. These activation cubes may be placed on one of your resource cards. Each player chooses one of these cards at the beginning of the game. When you earn an activation cube, you'll immediately place it on one of the spaces on the resource card. Some cards may be split into 2 possible actions, a weaker action at a lower cost or a stronger action at a higher cost. You can only place a token on one of the actions on a resource card, and these tokens cannot be moved. Once all of the activation spaces on a resource action are full, then that action is immediately available and may be used or saved for later. Once the action on a resource card is used, its cubes are removed, and the card is discarded, and a new resource card is drawn from the deck to replace it. Players have the opportunity to take 1 or 2 additional actions on their turn. However, for each extra action they take, they must draw a die out of the bag, which will be set aside and will be dropped on the next player's turn during the spill phase. These extra actions can be nice in a tight situation, but they come with a risk. Once a player's finished their turn, there's a cleanup phase. All face-up weather tokens are flipped face down. Then any contaminated animals that share a space with an oil die are moved to sick bay. Check to see if you've fulfilled any of the win conditions on the win condition card, placing a cube on the space to help you keep track. Finally, check to see if you've completed all 3 of your winning conditions, or if one of the losing conditions have been met. If neither of these have occurred, play continues to the next player. All right, that's a high-level overview of how to play the spill. Let's head back up, and I'll let you know what I think. We first took a look at this game at Gen Con in 2021, and we were immediately drawn in by the gimmick and the theme. Before we get too far, I want to point out that we backed this game on Kickstarter at the deluxe level. So our copy has wood tiles for the marine life tokens and the weather effect tiles. The standard version of the game uses cardboard tokens for these pieces, but that has no impact on gameplay whatsoever. I think if this game looks interesting to you, but you're not interested in the deluxe price tag, there's no reason you shouldn't consider the standard version. As far as the overall quality of the components go, this is a very nice production. The oil rig dice tower goes together easily and is pretty stable on the table. I will point out, though, that Both the tower and the retaining wall will probably need to be assembled at least partially each time you play, which is a minor pain. The tower likely wouldn't fit back in the box if you were to have it fully assembled. Luckily, the insert is quite good in the box, and you could probably leave the tower assembled with the exception of the base, and it would fit. I typically will toss inserts very quickly if they don't work out well, and this is one that I've kept, so that should tell you something. I like that the ships for each player color is a slightly different design, and the stickers for the tower also are a nice touch, although I never finished putting mine on because I don't like putting on stickers. The board is well laid out and easy to read, and even has a UV finish on the oil slick in the center of the board, which looks really nice. The tower can potentially block your line of vision to the other side of the board, so it does tend to work best if you have one person sitting on each side to manage each side of the board, although we didn't find it to be all that inconvenient. The illustrations by Kwanchai Moria are phenomenal. My favorite thematic touch in this game, though, is the fact that they used pearlized dice. It's a small thing, but it's perfect for the theme of this game, and I'm glad they went with them. As far as the gameplay goes, we thought the spill was quite good. We enjoy Pandemic and its different iterations over time, and this one falls kind of into that Pandemic-like co-op category. Unlike Pandemic, though, this game has win condition cards that will change your focus from game to game. Maybe one game you're focused more on saving wildlife, or maybe in another game you are focusing on removing oil dice. This adds a fair bit of replayability, as well as the ability to scale the difficulty level. You can also scale the difficulty by choosing to play either on standard, challenge, or ultimate difficulty, which will change how the game ramps up after each spill out. Another decision that I really like with this game are the resource cards. Your team will get 4 of them at the beginning of the game, but the catch is that you can't use them right away. In order to use them, you need to complete certain tasks to gain activation cubes. These cards can also be split into a weaker action that costs 1 cube, or a stronger action that could cost 2 or more. You can only activate 1 of the resource actions per card, and since you have to place the cubes immediately when you unlock them, and you're not allowed to move the cubes once they've been placed, that leads to a pretty tense decision between an immediate benefit or a longer-term investment. This also gives players a little more control over what benefit is received and when, as opposed to randomly drawing an action or event card from a deck. It's nice to have that kind of control because you're going to get your randomness in the form of the dice tower. Dropping the dice into the tower is incredibly fun and incredibly unpredictable. If you are someone who is not okay with randomness in a game, I don't know that this would be a game for you, because you can never quite be sure which quadrant those dice are going to fall into or which number will come up on each die. This can lead to some pretty frustrating moments where it seems like every die is working against you, which of course they are. So yeah, if that bothers you, might be best to look for a different co-op game. For us, we found it very exciting. No, you're not going to win every time, no matter how much you strategize. We don't mind a little bit of randomness and that kind of frustration in our co-op games. It can lead to some pretty intense moments where you're about to drop a bunch of dice in the tower and you just need it to miss this sector in this quadrant or it's all over. Okay, so in the end, we really enjoyed the spill. I don't think it's a game for everyone, but it is definitely a game for us. I give it a BGG rating of 8. I love the theme, I love the gimmick, and I love the look, and I can't wait to play it again. Alright everyone, that's our look at the spill. Let me know what you think of this game in the comments below, and until next time, let's get another round for the table.